The number one thing that brings people to me, to my channel and my coaching work, is that they can't stop thinking about work. I did that too, for years, like a champion. And in this video, I want to share how I changed that with one new idea per day for 5 days. Let's go back in time 20 years. I was a young professional working in a high-pressure corporate environment. I was doing well professionally. I was liked, my work was liked, I got good performance reviews. I was a bit insecure though, and my peace of mind was blighted by one thing in particular. I couldn't stop thinking about work. I'd sit down to enjoy dinner and think about work. I'd go for a walk and think about work. I'd go to bed and think about work. I didn't mind that to a certain degree, but I really wanted to be able to relax more and enjoy what I was doing outside of work. I knew I'd have more creative energy for work if I did. So, over 5 days, I implemented these 5 ideas. Well, 6 actually. There is a day 6, so hang around for it. I'd realised I was making a mistake. I was trying to shut out thoughts that I didn't want to think about. You can't control what shows up in the stream of thought, at least not all the time. And when an insistent thought shows up, it's like somebody knocking on the door. My thoughts were knocking at the door, so to speak, and I wasn't answering. I wasn't letting them in. I was mentally putting my hands over my ears and closing my eyes. But they kept knocking. And I remembered something that one of my influential teachers had taught me, and that is that when what you're doing isn't working, do something different. So I asked myself, what's different to not answering the door? Well, answering the door. I decided that if I recognized that some thought was knocking at the door, I wouldn't ignore it. I wouldn't try to shut it out. I'd metaphorically answer the door. I'd tune into that thought, so to speak, and ask, what is the message that you have for me? Now, when I did that and genuinely attended to the thought, acknowledged it, thanked it even, they stopped knocking. It was only me trying to ignore them that made them so insistent. When I did that, I also discovered that I could broadly separate these thoughts into 2 groups. There were the ones that had a genuinely useful message, something worth noting, and for those I received it. I decided what I was going to do about it, and I even thanked the thought for delivering it. And then there were the ones that didn't have a useful message. The ones that were just idle, suspicious rumination, insecurity. I found out how to respond to those a couple of days later. I had a second realization that one of the reasons I had so many thoughts flying around up here was because there's a lot to remember, and I was insecure about forgetting things. I realized that churning those thoughts over and over in my head was my way to not forget them. So I staged a second experiment, and that was to get what I was churning in my head out of my head and onto paper. So I got myself a pocket notebook, something small enough that I could carry anywhere, and I started to sit down and write into it 2 or 3 times a day, to write down the things that were in my mind. Now, that helped me see my thinking more clearly. It helped me get clearer about things that I needed to do. But most importantly, it stopped the churning. I realized something else. It was the act of physically writing it down that helped me reduce the churning. I don't know why, but it did. So nowadays, before I start any day of work, I have a morning coffee in solitude. Just me, my coffee, and my notebook. I really do like a good coffee, by the way. I think, I write, and it doubles my clarity about the day ahead. Thinking into my notebook was a massive help, but my mind kept churning things over. I didn't understand why at first, but then I realized there was something incomplete about what I was doing. I had answered the thoughts knocking at the door, I had written down what was on my mind, but I hadn't closed the loop, so to speak, by deciding what I was going to do about them. I hadn't made an agreement with myself about what I was going to do and when. That meant it was unfinished business. That meant it was churn. So I started writing down what I had intended to do, not just in cryptic single words, but in longhand. I will call Nick on Tuesday morning. The thing is, not every thought pointed at something to be done. For those thoughts, I still wrote something, but something more like, I understand this, but I intend to do nothing about this. That closed the loop. Of course, you need to keep referring to your notebook to make sure that you don't forget about the things you decided to do. By the way, if you're getting some value out of this, do give it the thumbs up. And to get more useful ideas like these, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the notifications bell so that you'll get notified when new content arrives. I'd mastered the art of tuning into my thoughts and getting the churn out of my head and onto paper. Now I decided to do something about those suspicious ruminating thoughts, the ones that didn't have a useful message, the ones that didn't point at any real action, the ones that were just a worry. I started to ask myself, what am I afraid of? Because I figured if I could get clear about what I was afraid of, I might not be afraid anymore. I found that that was the wrong question though. You see, when I asked myself that particular question, well, let's just say I was very good at, metaphorically speaking, creating imaginary monsters under the bed. I found that the much better question, at least for me, was, what am I afraid will happen? There's something more real about that question, something more useful, because when I tuned into what I was afraid would happen, I could see whether that was something that was realistic or not, and it made it easier to decide if there was something to do, and I got more grounded doing that. I had realised from books that I'd read and teachers and coaches that I'd worked with that what we're thinking of in the moment always seems much bigger and more significant than it really is. It's like what we're thinking of right now fills our whole world, fills our whole psychological space, if you will. So I started thinking about ways of correcting my perspective, to put the thought into perspective. At first I tried to do that by simply imagining that my world was much bigger than this thought, but that didn't really work that well for me. I found that what worked better was not to think of a larger space, but larger time, to look at a longer, broader time perspective, to think further into the future. How significant will this be in 3 months' time, in a year's time, in 5 years, in 10 years? By shifting from looking at just the time right in front of me to that thought in the context of a much longer time frame, it put the thing I was thinking about into perspective. This is the bonus day. I had recognised a great capacity in me to catastrophize things. My day 6 experiment was to deal with that, and to understand what I did, watch this video here. This is Steve, and I wish you health and happiness.